If not, I'm not gonna play next year. So the team was like, sorry, we can't. And then the coach was like, can anybody long snap? And I kind of raised my hand like I can do it. So that's how I kind of got started.
Amazing career.
Yeah.
I love that. And did anybody else in your family play long snappers?
No.
No. Well, before we get further along in your that, I think the greatest thing that you've ever produced, I think, is this great family. And we have them with us today. We've got Michelle and Mabel and Nora and Helen. And Lance isn't here, but that is the prettiest thing you've ever done. Is that right there? That's amazing. Let's give these guys a big hand here. Thanks for taking time out of your holiday to come. I know it's like vacation, and you got a speaking thing on your head there. Thank you. So when did you meet Michelle?
So we were high school sweethearts. So we probably knew each other in middle school, started dating sophomore, junior year in high school. Yeah. So
29. Was he shy back then? Yeah, that's what I figured. That's good. And so football became top sport for you. You played 4 years, started 4 years, tight end, caught a lot of footballs, became an All-American.
Yeah.
That one. So yeah, and you never decided to wrestle after that.
No, there's not much. Wrestling's hard, and there wasn't much scholarship. It was hard to get scholarship in wrestling.
Right. And so you knew that the NFL was going to be in your sights. You didn't think you would be a first-round pick, but you knew you wanted to be up there and you had these dreams. And so you got picked, and then of all places, Cincinnati. Was that were you a fan of Cincinnati?
I mean, actually, at the time, my agent was like, "You want to go anywhere but Cincinnati?" And so, but hey, I was just grateful to be drafted. So I was drafted, 4th pick, the 7th round, 210th overall. 10 picks after this guy you might know, Tom Brady. Have you heard of that guy?
He was like 10 picks before or after you?
Before me.
That's
Yeah.
it. So yeah, I've heard of him. Yeah. Junior college guy, right? Yeah, we've got one Patriots fan down here in Southern Missouri. I can't find a Kansas City guy. Definitely can't find a Bears guy around here. So, so you go to the NFL and play. Okay, obviously it's going to be your dream. Right now, what do you miss? You're looking back at it. What do you besides the paychecks? Because I know that. What do you miss?
Yeah. I mean, you miss the locker room, the camaraderie of the guys. I miss the adrenaline of Sundays, kind of walking out of the tunnel. The last couple of years, some of the perks, I got to ride first class. As the oldest, 8 guys, got to ride first class. Got my own parking spot the last few years. Those kind of things were kind of fun, just being a part of it.
How many years did it take for you to be one of the older guys? Because you played for 10 years.
Probably by my 8th year, I was in the top already because most people don't realize, man, there's a lot of turnover.
Oh, yeah, turnover. And you still see some of your friends? So you see some of your other players?
Yeah, we still got group text and stuff where guys give each other hard times. And one of the guys that originally was an example of faith to me was a spiritual leader. So still keep in touch with those guys.
Fantastic. And I don't know if you realize, but there is a big Christian presence in the world of American football. And that was an influence on your life, too. So you come in as a secular guy, good guy. It wasn't like you were all about doing bad things, but good guy, good family. And you guys were married at the time, and so. But then you, well, tell the story about how your coach would write the verses.
Yeah, my tight end coach had am I my brother's keeper? And it was yes, I am. He had written on his board, and so I noticed it was there he had it there for the entire time he coached, and so it was just always kind of in front of me, and then it made sense to me a little bit before I became a believer. Then after I became a believer while I was playing there, it really okay, I understand now what he's talking about.
The Spirit came in and just made these verses enlightened. That's why I told the story about
yeah.
And he was a believer, so a lot of coaches in the NFL are believers.
Yeah, there definitely were.
Yeah, and you were lucky to have him the entire time?
He was most of the time, probably 7 years.
That's an eternity in the NFL, which NFL stands for, not football. I thought that was funnier than that. That's why. Yeah, and so when did you become a Christian?
Yeah, so it was 2008, and so 2000 was my rookie year. And so it was the kind of the circumstances leading up to it. Really, like you said, you said I was a good kid. I considered myself a good moral kid, and if I compared myself to my friends, I was like, oh, I'm doing pretty good. If you would have asked me, I probably would have said I was a Christian, and then just the thought process of my head was, I'm a pretty good person, and when I die, God's He'll understand, and I'm gonna go to the good place instead of the bad place, right? And if there's some sort of scale, like I'm probably on the good side of it. But really, when I started, my father died in a bicycle accident in July 15th of 2008, and so.
And your dad was a very dominant part of your life. He was the athletic director of the school.
He was the principal. He was a former. He got drafted by the Redskins in like the 13th round.
What position was he?
He was the offensive tackle, and so, yeah, he was kind of the rock of our family, kind of my idol growing up, and. When he died, I just started asking the questions for the first time in my life. Okay, where's he at? Started asking what was his purpose in life, and then also he had some chinks in his armor, along the way. He left my mom when I was in college, and so I kind of saw like he wasn't perfect, and so I was like, man, if my dad is the hardest worker, the hardest persevering person I know, and he still couldn't make it work, some things. I might be in trouble too at some point. So those kind of things started crossing my mind, and then Michelle came to me about a month later, and she had a lot going on. She was unhappy, and she was like kind of at the point where, Brad, I think I'm ready to leave, and I was clueless. And so I kind of went into panic mode. And so for the first time in my life, I'm like, I went and sought out somebody who had been befriending me for the last 8 years with the Bengals. His name was Ken Moyer. He was our team chaplain. So kind of like what you did in Indiana, he did with us with the Bengals. And he invited me to Bible studies for 8 years, and I was like, no thanks, man, I'm good. To me, it was like our ongoing joke. He was going to ask me, and I was going to tell him no thanks. So he asked me every week.
8 years.
8 years for a couple studies, Bible studies he had at the chapels. And but I liked to talk to him. We were friends. And then so when Michelle came. Former player. And so when Michelle came to me, I sought him out like right away, like, help, man, I need help. And so he's like, hey, see if Michelle's willing to come over to the house, and our wife kind of will help you out. And so they started counseling us, and then sharing scriptures along the way. I'm just, whatever, just to fix it, kind of like, just help me. But they were sharing the gospel the whole time. And so finally, when he was sharing the gospel, like, and Brad, you're separated from God, God's on the throne, and your sin separates you, I could see it for the first time in my life, like, because the person I loved the most was hurting, I didn't know it. And, like if you would ask me, hey, where's your marriage at, scale of 1 to 10, I probably would have been 7 or 8, think we're doing pretty good, and she was at like a 0. And so just knowing that, like, it was clear as day at that point. And so in November of 2008, him and his wife were leading Michelle and I to the Lord in their living room. So, yeah, surrendering our lives. And
the thing is, it's so rare to see an older player. They get caught in their ways and stuff. So,
yeah.
you got a lot of amazing life ahead of you, doing some neat things. So as a player, well, let me ask you one more question in the NFL. This is just for me, but who's the most dominant guy, this is the guy that just stands out in the NFL during your 10-year career?
Like I played with?
Played with or played against, yeah.
We have a right tackle. Most people probably hadn't heard him because we weren't very good with it, but his name was Willie Anderson. He'll probably be in the NFL or inducted in the Hall of Fame in the next few times. He's getting close. So he was just so dominant. He made it look easy. Like the coach would go, to the other lineman, don't watch Willie because you can't do what he does. Do this technique because he was just different. Playing against Ray Lewis, that was pretty cool. Because while I was on punt team, they'd do defense stay. Sometimes he'd be on the field, so I was.
Be talking smack.
Yeah. So.
Right. Yeah. Very cool. Okay. When you got out of the NFL, 10 years, it's an incredible career. You had mentioned this to me, and I was surprised because I really respect you, and I figured you knew it, but it was hard after you got out, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a big transition. I mean, I grew up kind of my life before a believer. Like the goal was, kind of my dad was like, hey, play enough years, 10 years was kind of our number, like so you don't have to work again. And then you can just go play golf and tennis the rest of your life. And then after I kind of came to faith, it was like, that was unfulfilling. There's like, so now your identity is, as much as I tried, was in football. People come up to you, hey, you're the football player. They don't mean it that way, but then your identity can be in that. And so like, okay, now what? And then a big part of me is like, coming to faith late in my life, I felt like I really wasted a lot of my life. And like, a lot of these years, they were great, but they weren't serving Christ. And so what's the value of it? And so really took me time to find, okay, what's my purpose in life? How's God going to use me? I got time, gifts, talents, treasures, like how am I going to use this for the Lord? And so that's what I actually wrote to you. So how I met Steve was he had wrote some sports ministry books, and so I was just looking on Amazon, bought his book, emailed him, introduced myself, like, hey, this is Brad. I'm Brad. This is my story. What would you do if you were me, like in life? And so he actually.
I'd be a lot skinnier.
He actually, we emailed back and called, and then he was like, hey, why don't you come stay with me for a couple days? Invited me out to Indiana when he was chapel for the Hoosier team, and he asked me to speak in front of the team. Little did he know that was like my first speaking engagement that I've done, but I was like, I just wanted to say yes to God and see what happened. So.
And the cool thing was that his chapel came to that.
Yeah.
So that was amazing.
Yeah.
And so what are you doing now?
I run a health coaching business. It's kind of my main thing I'm doing. I'm also a strength coach at a high school, so with my boys are there.
And tell us just briefly about your ministry, what you're doing with the FCA and that.
Yeah, and so one of them we were able to do, bring the gospel in the school with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. It's kind of one thing we do, and then that's allowed me to do a lot of speaking engagements in the Valley to speak to different kids and host things in the school. And the weight room's a little different. As a teacher, you can be a little more. I'm like, if the coach can MF the kids on the football field, like I can talk about God and not get in trouble. So I kind of use advantage of that as much as I can to kind of tell the importance of God in their lives about, hey, football is great, sporting is great, but without God, it's not gonna be worth it. I would just, a word of encouragement would be, God wants to use your story. So, I came from a small town, and sometimes we can go, okay, how is God going to use me? Or maybe you're stuck in like a family lineage that doesn't serve God, but maybe you're going to be the one that's going to change your lineage, change the direction of your life to break the chains, that you're going to be the one that's going to stop it. You're going to be the one that's going to follow God, and your whole family's going to start following. Just really important to me, just after spending a lot of time with the family that doesn't do that. And then also sometimes I think, maybe you've maybe had a past where you don't think you're qualified. So maybe your sin or your broken relationships or something that's happened to you, and it's actually going to be the thing that's going to qualify you to help somebody else. And so don't discount your message, your testimony. So.
Read our scriptures for today as we go into
You bet.
that, and then I'm going to pray for you.
Genesis 1:26. Then God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. They will rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, all the earth, and the creatures that crawl on the earth. So God created man in his own image. He created him in the image of God. He created them male and female. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. Rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and every creature that crawls on the earth. God also said, look, I have given you every seed-bearing plant on the surface of the entire earth and every tree whose fruit contains seed. This food will be for you. Good. Evening came, prepared to exist.